I worked as a night nurse at a city hospital. This was a year ago, and I was 32. It felt old and worn down. The dim halls seemed to whisper. The smell of antiseptic always hung in the air. It reminded me how fragile life is. I was also caring for my sick father at home. I thought the tough nights would just tire me out. One shift, I made my rounds and noticed a patient in isolation. He was wide awake, staring at the wall like it had secrets. I walked over, and he started mumbling strange words. His gaze felt cold, and I froze in place. I didn't understand him at all. I backed away, my heart pounding. The next night, I passed the same room. I thought I heard whispers coming from inside, but the patient was still alone. It made my skin crawl. Maybe I was just tired. I looked at the monitors. Everything seemed stable. I shook off the feeling and moved on. By the third night, things got weirder. I found medical tools in places I hadn't left them. I started second-guessing my notes. Was I just stressed? I felt shadows darting in my peripheral vision. They flickered in the dim light. When I turned to look, nothing was there. My heart raced. It felt wrong again. One night I walked past the isolated room. The door was cracked open and I stopped. I listened closely. I heard a voice, but it wasn't the patient's. It echoed through the room. My stomach churned. I thought about going inside, but my body wouldn't budge. Maybe I was imagining things. Then, right in front of me, I saw it. A quick movement against the wall. A shadow. I blinked, and it was gone. I felt drawn to the patient. It was like he was trying to tell me something. But what? The feeling of unease grew. I started to doubt my mind. The nights were blurring. I was tired, sure. But these strange feelings, they felt haunting. I didn't know if I should be worried. On the next night, I stood at the doorway of his room. The patient stared right at me. He pointed to the corner and my breath stopped. All the color left my face. I wanted to ask him what he saw, but I felt frozen. What was he trying to warn me about? Then he whispered, "You have to leave." I couldn't respond. I didn't know what that even meant. Things seemed to blur afterward. I remember walking down the hall. My heart was wild. I felt eyes watching me. I glanced over my shoulder. Then I heard it, a voice asking, "Why are you still here?" I spun around, but there was nobody, just shadows in the dim light. I couldn't shake what happened. I still think about those nights. Even now, I feel that chill creeping back. I wonder what it all meant. Did I learn something that night? Was there a warning I missed? I'll never forget. I just never understood. I returned to work that next night, trying to act normal. The hospital buzzed with the usual activity, but I felt different, like I was walking on a tightrope. I did my rounds, but every click of my shoes echoed too loudly in my mind. I couldn't shake off that warning. When I reached the isolation room, I hesitated. The door stood closed. I took a deep breath and knocked lightly. No response. I pushed it open and the darkness inside felt thicker than before. The patient lay still, eyes open but lifeless. I felt a chill run down my spine as I stepped closer. His gaze drifted to the corner and I followed it. Nothing was there. I convinced myself I was being paranoid, but the feeling of dread only intensified. I needed to get back to my rounds, but the whispering from before nagged at my mind. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye, a small piece of paper on the floor. I picked it up and my stomach dropped. It was a patient file, but old and damaged. I squinted at the name. It was him, the patient who had been in isolation for months. The details were blurred, but I noticed a date from 10 years ago. That's when I realized he wasn't just any patient. His file listed him as deceased. My heart raced. Why was this here? I showcased the file in front of the patient. "What does this mean?" I whispered. He continued staring at the corner, seemingly lost in another world. Then I heard it again. The voice. "You have to find him." My blood turned to ice. Who did I need to find? The shadows around me thickened. It felt like they were reaching for me. I dropped the file back on the floor and stumbled out of the room. My instincts urged me to escape. In the break room, I splashed water on my face, but it didn't help. I needed answers. I started to rummage through old patient records. My heart sank as I went down the pages. The connection didn't make sense. Patients listed in that ward seemed to disappear one by one. Many had passed before their time. Hours ticked by without any clarity. I glanced up at the clock. It was already past midnight. I was about to leave when the lights began to flicker. The air became heavy. Then came the whispers, chanting in a low, haunting tone. "Find him. Find him." I looked toward the corridor. It felt like a puzzle waiting for pieces to fall into place. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The whispers followed me, wrapping around me like a shroud. That's when I noticed it. The isolation room door swung wide open. My heart thudded as I approached, unsure if it was even safe to look inside. Was the patient still there? When I reached the doorway, I froze. The room was empty. No patient. Just the lingering shadows and that oppressive silence. Then immediately a voice shot through the tension. "You shouldn't have come back." I whipped around, but there was no one there, just darkness. I took a deep breath and stepped back, my pulse racing. Something was very wrong. That's when I saw it. A figure appearing at the end of the corridor, a silhouette against the bright exit sign. They stood still, just watching. I couldn't make out any features. All I knew was I needed to know who it was. But I felt a cold dread hold me in place, my instincts screaming for me to turn and run. I hesitated, but I couldn't leave like this. Not now. I took a step forward, ready to confront whatever awaited me. As I took that step, the figure remained still, and the whispers escalated. "Find him," they chanted, echoing through the corridor like a ghostly wind. My heart raced in time with my breaths. Each whisper felt like it was crawling under my skin. I steadied myself, focusing on the silhouette. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice wavering. The figure didn't respond or move. Was it waiting for me? I took another cautious step, the flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. The light flickered, adding a quick strobe effect that made my skin crawl. Then, without warning, the air around me chilled. I glanced back at the isolation room. Something felt off. For a moment, my gut twisted. I had to go back. Maybe I had missed something. I turned but found the corridor darker, as if shadows were creeping in from every corner. With each step towards the isolation room, the whispers grew louder, almost raging. "You shouldn't have come back," they cried out, drowning my resolve. I felt a tightness in my chest. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, ready to confront whatever truth lay inside. But the room was empty again. The chill that gripped me this time felt different. This wasn't just the absence of a patient. It felt like a void. I scanned the room for any clues when my eyes landed on the corner, the spot where the patient had been staring moments before. There, beneath the stark fluorescent light, was another piece of paper. It flickered in a draft I couldn't feel. I hesitated only briefly, then crouched to pick it up. My heart plunged when I realized it was another patient file, also damaged but more legible than the last. I held my breath as I read the name. It was different this time. Jonathan Davis. I recognized the name. He had been a patient years before I started working there, always mentioned in hushed tones by the other staff. He had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, they said. Rumors suggested he had been doing something forbidden. I quickly glanced at the dates. He had gone missing shortly after the last entry of the other patient in my hands. An unsettling truth started to sink in. These patients were connected. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Suddenly a cold breeze swept through the room, snatching the file from my hands. It spiraled into the air before dropping at my feet. The whispers surged again, more frantic. "You have to find him. You must find Jonathan." I grabbed the fallen file and turned back to the door, resolve flooding over me. I couldn't leave the hospital, not now. I needed to uncover this mystery. Before I could reach for the door handle, the lights flickered one last time, plunging me into darkness. Panic set in, and with it, the realization that I wasn't alone. I felt a presence behind me, looming, watching. I turned slowly, and that's when I saw it. A figure, indistinct and shrouded in shadow, was standing just inside the doorway. My breath caught in my throat. It lifted a hand, pointing. To what? As fear threaded through me, I turned to run the other way, but the hush fell over the air like a heavy curtain. I needed to find Jonathan, but now I had no idea how to escape this madness. I pressed my back against the cold wall, heart pounding in my chest. The figure's shadow loomed larger, darker, as if it absorbed the remaining light in the room. I could barely breathe. The whispers had turned into a deep, echoing laughter that ricocheted off the walls, taunting me. Find him! Find him! I glanced back toward the door I had just exited. In my mind, the isolation room felt like a lifeline. I had to go back. I had to find a way out of this nightmare. Summoning a shaky breath, I calculated the safest path. I made for the door, bracing myself for whatever was waiting for me. But the instant I took that first step, the laughter ceased. A profound silence descended, cloaking the corridor. The chill thickened, pulsating around me like an icy fog. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to move forward. In a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of the figure moving behind me, a blur of darkness darting closer. I slammed the door to the isolation room shut, locking it tight. My hand trembled as I leaned against it, catching my breath. But I couldn't hide. My eyes darted around the abandoned room, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. There was an old desk, papers scattered across it. I hurried over, shoving aside old medical charts and empty coffee cups. My fingers brushed against another file. Its cover worn and faded, but the name on it caught my attention. Jonathan Davis. These files had to mean something. What if he still lingered here, his spirit refusing to leave? I flipped it open. Ink smeared, but certain phrases began to emerge. Reports of unexplainable behavior, notes about attempted escapes. I felt my stomach lurch. If only I could understand why he had disappeared. I heard something then. A soft scraping sound like nails against the floor. I froze, heart racing. The whispers slowly returned, weaving through the air like smoke. He's coming. He's coming. It wasn't just the figure anymore. It felt like something else was here with me, something more sinister. I flipped the file shut and clutched it like a lifeline. I needed to know more. But before I could gather my thoughts, the lights flickered back to life. The harsh fluorescent glow cast long shadows that danced across the floor. In the far corner, an object glinted. A key. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. As I moved closer, a wave of nausea hit me. It was a patient's wristband, stained and old. I was paralyzed with unease as I realized it bore Jonathan's name. This was a part of him left behind. The laughter erupted again, deeper and more unsettling, as if I had just stepped into a trap. I snapped my gaze around the room, sensing the presence creeping closer. I needed to escape, but every fiber of my being wanted to find answers. Suddenly the whispers grew deafening, drowning out my thoughts. You have to help him. He needs you. I felt the temperature drop again as the air grew thick. That's when I saw Jonathan, a fleeting image, a face twisted in fear, his eyes wide. The next moment he was gone, leaving only the echo of something dark and foreboding. What was happening? I had seen him, but only for a moment. Panic surged through me again. I had to leave before the shadows swallowed me whole. But the door wouldn't budge. I pushed with all my weight, but it held firm. What was trapping me inside? Then I heard it, a faint whisper right at my ear, so close I could feel its breath. Help him. That was it. My mind raced. What if this wasn't just about Jonathan? What if he was part of something much worse? I couldn't stay. With every ounce of strength, I kicked the door. It cracked open just enough for me to slip through and into the corridor. But the moment I stepped outside, the whispers continued their chant louder than ever. Find him! Find him! And as I turned back to look, my heart sank. The figure stood there pointing again, but now it felt like it was pointing at me. I staggered back, panic rising as I locked eyes with the figure. It was still, but the pointing finger seemed to draw me in, like a moth to a flame. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I turned and ran down the corridor, my mind racing. Find him! The whispers echoed in my ears, wrapping around me like a shroud. I dashed past flickering lights and peeling paint. The remnants of a once busy hospital now turned to dust and shadows. I needed to gather my thoughts. Where was I supposed to find him? The isolation room offered a hint, but what did it mean? I didn't know if Jonathan was a ghost, a victim, or something darker entirely. More whispers brushed against me as I ran, clear voices blending with the laughter. I could almost make out words. "Don't let him touch you," they warned, sending chills across my skin. I felt my heart race faster, as if responding to a predator lurking just out of sight. I turned a corner and saw a faded map on the wall. My breath hitched. The floor plan of the hospital? It was hard to make out through the grime, but it marked emergency room in bold letters. Maybe Jonathan had spent his last moments there. Maybe something happened to him that I could uncover. I hesitated, the weight of the decision crushing down on me. Behind me, I could hear the figure moving, its footsteps echoing off the tiles. I couldn't risk staying longer. I began moving again, heading toward the end of the corridor where the emergency room should be, my footsteps muffled by dread. As I approached, the sound of rushing water reached my ears, like a faucet left running. It felt wrong, out of place. I peeked around the doorframe. The emergency room was lit, the fluorescent lights illuminating a long row of empty beds. They were eerily clean, devoid of any sign of use. The only thing noticeable was the sink, water spilling over steadily, pooling on the floor. I stepped inside, wrinkling my nose at the overwhelming scent of antiseptic. The silence was deafening. My eyes darted around. Where was everyone? I moved closer to the sink, drawn in by the sound. That's when I caught sight of something in the basin, an object, so small and insignificant yet it made my stomach drop. It was a little toy soldier, caked in dirt, almost hidden in the container of water. I picked it up, wiping it with my sleeve. The initials were etched into it, J.D. Jonathan Davis. I barely had time to process it when I heard a loud crash behind me. I spun around to see the figure standing at the doorway, its presence filling the room with unease. Now it was a full confrontation. I couldn't breathe. My pulse raced wildly. The thing took a step forward. "You shouldn't have come here." Its voice was a low growl. The whispers increased, reaching a fever pitch, driving me toward the exit. I dropped the toy soldier, turning to flee, but the figure moved faster. "You need to make a choice," it rasped, and suddenly my escape felt far away. I sprinted toward the door, heart hammering in my chest. As I reached the exit, I glanced back one last time. The figure pointed again, and in its shadow I thought I saw Jonathan, pleading, trapped between realms. The choice loomed over me, but I ran. Whatever secrets this place held, I was not ready to face them. I burst through the emergency room door, my feet pounding against the cold tiles as I made my escape. My lungs burned and I struggled to catch my breath. The corridor stretched before me, empty and foreboding. The low buzz of the overhead lights buzzed like angry wasps. I needed to find a way out, a way to put as much distance between me and that figure as possible. But my instinct pulled me back toward the other cracked doors lining the hallway. I hesitated at the first one, labeled supply room. Wasn't it just a closet of discarded medical supplies? Or could there be something inside that would help me make sense of what I was seeing, and help save Jonathan? I pushed the door open cautiously, the hinges creaking in protest. The room was dimly lit, but I could see shelves lined with sterile bandages, broken instruments, and boxes of medications. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me quietly. I felt like I was stealing a moment of calm in the midst of chaos. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a small notebook on the floor. I knelt down to pick it up. Its pages were yellowed and torn, filled with scrawled handwriting. As I flipped through, I caught snippets of notes, patient names, dates, and then something that stopped me cold. Room 304 was written several times, alongside a string of incoherent thoughts. "He speaks in whispers," one entry read. "Never let him touch you." A chill ran down my spine. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt urgent. My eyes darted back toward the door, anxiety creeping in. I had to get to room 304. Leaving the supply room, my heart raced anew. I moved down the corridor, knocking into a gurney that sat in my path. It squeaked loudly, echoing off the walls. I froze in place, listening intently. The whispers returned, swirling silently around me. My hands trembled as I pressed forward. As I neared room 304, something caught my attention. The door was ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning to me. I paused, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. But curiosity gnawed at me relentlessly, urging me on. I pushed the door open slowly. The room felt suffocatingly cold. I stepped inside and immediately recoiled. The room was filled with clutter, a singular hospital bed at its center. But it was what lay beside it that made my skin prickle. A cracked mirror reflecting my pale face, and next to it a child's drawing taped haphazardly to the wall. The drawing was crude but obvious. It depicted a boy standing beside a faceless figure, both surrounded by ghostly shadows. Panic surged through me. My breathing quickened again. Could this be Jonathan? How had he ended up here? Then everything shifted. The door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, heart racing. "Let me out," I cried, pounding on the heavy metal door, but it didn't budge. Then I noticed the mirror again. This time the reflection wasn't just my own. I saw a flicker, a face emerging from the shadows behind me. I turned, but the room was empty. The reflection smiled back slowly in the glass, a twisted grin. And then came the whispers once more, louder than ever, almost shouting now. "He's here. You've let him in." I stumbled back, my mind racing. I had to find Jonathan. But now, whatever darkness was here had taken notice of me. The panic was settling in once more, and just then, the lights flickered above me. I needed an escape plan, and quickly. But how could I get out when I wasn't even sure what I was dealing with? I slammed my fists against the door, desperation clawing at my throat. "Help! Let me out!" But no one answered. The cold chill of the room settled around me like a thick fog, heavy and suffocating. I could still hear the whispers swirling, an unsettling symphony that was almost a heartbeat. Suddenly the mirror caught my eye again. I stepped closer, my breath quickening. That face wasn't just a trick of the light. It felt alive. The twisted smile widened, and then it began to move. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. There was something behind me, something worse than I'd imagined. I turned around in a panic. My instincts urged me to search the cluttered room for anything I could use. I rushed past the bed, nearly tripping over a medical cart littered with needles and empty vials. What was I even looking for? I didn't want a weapon. I just wanted to find Jonathan. "Think," I murmured, fighting against the fear that threatened to consume me. The notebook, I needed to remember what it said. Room 304 and the strange whispers. It meant something. I turned back to the mirror, hoping for clarity, but all I saw was the reflection of a haunted girl standing in a nightmare. Then, out of nowhere, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a split second. I gasped, feeling the air grow heavy. I squeezed my eyes shut, more terrified of what might greet me in the gloom. When the lights returned, I could have sworn the reflection was closer, the grin even wider. There was an intensity in those eyes that froze me. Shook my head, trying to dispel the fear. "This isn't real," I told myself. "It's just a trick." But as I turned to the door again, I felt the temperature drop even further. It was like something foul was creeping in, wrapping around my ankles like a shadow, pulling me down. Suddenly I heard it, a voice behind me. "Come play with us." It was a child's voice, sweet yet laced with something sinister. I turned my head slowly, dread pooling in my stomach, and there it was. A figure stood by the window, bathed in a flickering light. I could barely make out its features, but the face looked like a twisted caricature of a child, eyes wide and dark. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but I was paralyzed. "Let him go," I shouted, my voice trembling. The entity blinked, and for a moment it seemed to consider my words. Then it turned its head to the side, a flicker of mischief dancing in its gaze. I felt the room shudder slightly, an overwhelming pressure pushing against me. I had to get out, but the way forward seemed more menacing than ever. I rushed back to the door, throwing my weight against it. Then, inexplicably, the whispers shifted. You brought him here. He's part of the game now. With a sinking feeling, I grasped that the child wasn't alone. Jonathan was somewhere close, trapped in whatever this entity had created. I took a step back, fear gnawing at my determination. I could either face the figure or search the room for another way out. My breath quickened as I made my choice. I couldn't leave Jonathan behind, no matter the cost. That was my only certainty amid the chaos. Just as I turned to search for a means of escape, an echo surged through the room, louder than before. You're too late. I hesitated, heart racing. The words seeped into my skin, a cold embrace that promised despair. It was never just about me. Now I had to find a way to confront what was lurking in the shadows. The entity tilted its head, and the air grew heavy with tension. I turned, desperately searching the room. There had to be a way out or a clue that would lead me to Jonathan. As I scanned the walls, I caught sight of a dusty old trunk tucked away in the corner. It stood out like a relic from another time, and I felt a pull toward it. With a shaky breath, I hurried over, feeling the chill from the window creep toward me. My fingers fumbled with the rusty latch, and the trunk creaked open. Inside lay a jumble of old papers, long-forgotten medical records, and a small toy. A stuffed bear with one eye missing. It looked oddly familiar. Suddenly, a surge of memories flooded back. Jonathan had a bear just like this one. I grabbed it, clutching it to my chest. Jonathan, I whispered, a flicker of hope igniting. What if this was a clue? Before I could think further, the whispers returned, growing louder. You shouldn't have done that, they hissed. I dropped the bear back into the trunk, panic setting in. I needed to focus. I rifled through the papers, searching for any mention of room 304. Most of it was too faded to read, but one document caught my eye. It was an admission sheet dated 10 years ago. The name listed was Jonathan Sinclair. My heart raced. This was real. Also, there was a section filled with scribbled notes of strange activities occurring around him during his stay. Words like fear manifestations and disruptive entities struck me like icy arrows. Then, the lights flickered again. I cursed under my breath and pressed my back against the trunk. In that moment, I realized the whispers weren't just random noise. They formed a pattern pulsing around me like a heartbeat. I squinted, trying to decipher their meaning. He wants to play, they chanted. You must join. A sudden blast of cold air swept through the room, and the figure by the window swayed like a marionette on strings. My stomach twisted. If Jonathan was trapped in this nightmare because of me, I had to act fast. As if responding to my thought, the figure grinned, revealing rows of jagged, sharp teeth. Come find him. The game is fun, it taunted, its voice echoing around the room like a haunting melody. I clenched my fists. There might not be much time. I had to confront this thing, but how? Just as I stepped forward, a loud bang reverberated through the room, startling me. The trunk snapped shut on its own, sealing the bear and the notes inside. My heart raced as a realization hit me. I needed a distraction. I moved to the medical cart where I'd seen the vials. Maybe I could create something to confuse it. Just as I reached for a vial, the lights flickered and then went out completely. Darkness enveloped me, my breath echoing in the stillness. I felt a presence behind me, solid and cold. Too late, a voice whispered, chilling me to the core. The game has already begun. I stood frozen, dread pooling within me, as I realized I was no longer alone. I stood in the darkness, every sense heightened. My pulse thudded in my ears. I turned slowly, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever lurked behind me. The air felt thick, as if it were pushing against me. Then I heard it. A soft giggle, like a child playing hide-and-seek. My heart dropped. The laughter crawled beneath my skin, and I fought the urge to run. "Jonathan," I called out, my voice a shaky whisper. "Is that you?" But deep inside, I knew he wasn't behind me. Before I could take another step, a soft light flickered to life beside me, illuminating the floor in a pale glow. My breath caught as I turned, and there it was, a small lantern flickering on an old metal table. Something compelled me to approach it, a thread of curiosity woven through my fear. As I reached the lantern, I noticed something lying beside it, a crumpled piece of paper. I picked it up with trembling hands and unfolded it. The writing was erratic and hurried, barely legible. It read, "They want to play, but they don't like you." The words ignited a flare of panic inside me. Who were they? Did it mean the entity? Suddenly, another giggle erupted, this time louder and closer. I dropped the note, the soft thud breaking the silence. The lantern flickered again, casting shadows that twisted and turned. I looked back toward the door. Maybe I could escape. I took a step, then froze. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow flitted past the window, and a chill raced down my spine. My instincts kicked in. I had to find Jonathan. Maybe he knew how to beat whatever was slowly closing in on me. Instead of the door, I turned toward the far wall. There had to be another way out, something hidden. The medical cabinet. I sprinted to it, wrenching open the drawers. Bandages, syringes, and more vials surrounded me. I rummaged through the chaos, looking for anything useful. Then everything went dark again. The lantern snuffed out as if someone blew it out right in front of me. My heart pounded and I stumbled backward, knocking against the cabinet. "No, no, no," I whispered frantically. I slammed the drawer shut, praying for the light to return, but it didn't. The laughter came again, a crescendo of delight. It echoed all around me, bouncing off the walls. I felt the panic rise in my chest, choking me. I wasn't alone. I could feel presences gathering, something wicked closing in. "Join the game," they sang in unison. The words felt like ice sinking deep into my bones. I fell to my knees, my hands pressing against the floor as I fought to breathe. That's when I saw it. A tiny sliver of light emerging from a crack in the wall not far from where I sat. It pulsed, inviting me. I knew I needed to reach it. Maybe it was a way out, or a path to Jonathan. But before I could get up, a figure stepped into my line of sight, blocking the light. It was the entity, eyes gleaming with malice and excitement. "You're not going anywhere," it whispered, the words dripping with anticipation. The game was far from over, and I was losing. With the promise of escape hanging tantalizingly close, I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, feelings of dread cutting through the haze of determination. The figure loomed before me, its shadow stretching like dark smoke against the flickering light. "You're not going anywhere," it hissed, a twisted smile spreading across its face. I fought back panic, retracing my thoughts. The lantern had been my beacon, the promise of illumination and clarity. But now, this entity stood in my way, blocking my path to freedom. I took a tentative step back, and the laughter swelled around me, a chorus celebrating my fear. "Let him go," I shouted, voice wavering but laced with fierce conviction. The whispers morphed into laughter, filling the air like a chilling breeze. "He's ours. Join the game instead." I shook my head, refusing to accept the reality being forced upon me. I needed to find Jonathan. I needed to break this cycle. I scanned the room, searching for anything to help me. My eyes landed on the glint of a medical cart nearby, tangled with vials and syringes. Maybe there was something I could use. I lunged toward it, desperate, the figure trailing behind me like a shadow in pursuit. As I rifled through the contents, my hands trembled. I picked up one vial, its label read, "Sedative." My heart raced. If I could somehow use these tools to create a distraction, perhaps I could buy myself enough time to find Jonathan. Just as the laughter crescendoed into a cacophony, I flung the vial against the far wall. It shattered, releasing a cloud of thick vapor that enveloped the room. I had no time to think. The entity roared in anger, the sound echoing in the thickening haze. I dashed toward the crack of light, urgency coursing through my veins. The whispers persisted, some of them beckoning, others threatening. "You can't escape him. He's part of the game now." I reached the wall, desperation pushing me to pry open the crevice, my fingers finding a deep edge in the plaster. With all my strength, I shoved against the wall, finally exposing a small gap. The warmth of the light seeped through, wrapping me in hope. But the entity wasn't finished yet. It lunged forward, desperation clawing at its features. "You shouldn't have come here, you'll regret it." I could feel the darkness chase me, a breath behind my neck, but I squeezed through the narrow opening even as fear clawed at my insides. I tumbled into the escape, light flooding everywhere. But as I emerged, I found myself in another dimly lit corridor. I pushed myself to my feet, chest heaving. "Jonathan!" I called out, my voice trailing into silence. But the shadows lingered there, buzzing with life, curling around me like fingers. I glanced back, realizing the figure had slipped through the crevice behind me, its form a dark stain against the brilliant light. I ran, hearing laughter grow faint as I dashed towards the echo of my own heartbeat. As I turned the corner, I stumbled into a small waiting area. Chairs were overturned. An old television buzzed mutedly in the corner. There, hanging on the wall, was a faded photograph, a group of children, happy and smiling. My breath hitched. Jonathan was amongst them, a shy boy grinning at the camera. He had looked so hopeful. The sight thickened the air with a sense of urgency. A sign above them read, "Children's Ward, a place of healing." Had he died here, or worse? Had something else taken him? I turned away, heart racing with every thought rushing through my mind. I had to find him. I had to know what happened. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to set him free. The whispers returned, bantering in the background. "You're too late. It's already begun." I glanced over my shoulder, anxiety surging again as the corridor seemed to pulse with a dark energy. The shadows thrummed around me, thickening as though they had gained sentience. And then I heard it, faint, but unmistakably there, a soft, childlike giggle. "Help me. Please." My heart plummeted, gripping my throat like vice. Was it Jonathan? A new wave of determination struck. "I'm coming, Jonathan." I pushed myself down the corridor, past the echoes following the sound. It intensified, guiding me deeper into the maze. Moments turned into an eternity as I reached what looked like an old examination room. Jonathan's voice called, "Help me." A flicker of hope surged through me. I kicked the door open, breathless. The room was dimly lit, filled with dusty equipment and scattered papers. At one end, the remnants of a bed lay eerily untouched. As I stepped inside, I felt the same oppressive heaviness return. "Where are you?" I muttered, scanning every surface. "Please, if you can hear me." And then it happened. A small figure darted into view, faint, like a shadow given life. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart sank. Was it just another trick, the game playing with my mind? I pushed harder. "Show yourself! Let me help you!" Suddenly the whispers converged into a single thing, a pulse wrapping around my consciousness, thundering, "You have to find him!" Jonathan's desperate cry cut through the fog. "Help me!" I dove toward the corner where darkness ebbed, a twisted shadow clinging like smoke. As I reached for it, the air stiffened, my fingertips brushing against something solid. A coldness rippled through me. The figure emerged again, but not as a solid form. It flickered in and out of view, drawing closer. I summoned my courage and grasped for it. "You're not alone," I shouted. "I won't leave you." The figure paused, reflection clear in the darkness. "Help me." And in that instant I understood. This was no game but a plea. Jonathan was trapped, bound by shadows. The laughter faded, replaced by a desperate stillness. I couldn't see everything, but I could feel Jonathan reaching for me. I dug deeper, eyes wide. "I'll find you." The darkness enveloped me, enticing, threatening. The entity hissed in outrage behind me, as though I had uncovered something forbidden. But I wouldn't back down. I could feel Jonathan's fear. It fueled me. "I am coming for you." I held onto the flickering outline, feeling joy surge as light encroached upon the darkness. Tawny fingers of illumination began to mix with the shadows, illuminating a path ahead. And just as I stepped deeper into the void, pulling Jonathan along with me, darkness erupted around. A scream echoed, vibrating against the walls, a sound full of anguish as the shadows receded. I fell back. The shock echoed. "Jonathan!" My voice broke the silence and the world shifted. And in that split second, A warm glow enveloped me, moments stretching into eternity. When I opened my eyes, the corridor below me transformed. The shadows vanished, and the whispers faded, a haunting echo absorbed by the cleansing light. I gazed around, and there he was, a small boy smiling, illuminated in the soft glow of dawn. His face shimmered with happiness as he stepped gracefully toward me. "Are you real?" I whispered, breathless. "I'm free," he said simply, his eyes sparkling. I reached out, but the light seemed to pulse again, the world shifting. Shadows began to gather. "Face the truth. Will you stay or rise?" The laughter rang out, a challenge resounding across dimensions. I hesitated, looking at Jonathan, who was now on the threshold of something greater. "I want to help you." And just like that, the light engulfed me, consuming the darkness. As I felt Jonathan slip away, a flicker of hope was born amidst chaos. The questions remained. Where would this path lead? And what about the creature behind the veil? Those mysteries loomed large, unwritten stories waiting to unfold in the forgotten corridors of time. But I had changed. In choosing him, I had embraced the light, and I would follow it wherever it led, never forgetting my own humanity, never forgetting the whispers that had guided me to this moment.